Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. We are going to dive right in today. It is March 2025, and we are talking AI.
We are.
And we've got a lot to cover. We've got this big McKinsey report on AI in the workplace. And of course, some breaking news. Google dropped Gemini 2.5.
Yes.
So we're going to be talking about that. We'll look at ChatGPT and kind of the current AI market landscape, and then some other interesting stories that have been developing.
Right. There's a lot going on in the world of AI right now.
There is. It's hard to keep up with.
It is. It is.
But we are going to try to do that for you today. So hopefully by the end of this deep dive, you'll kind of have the big picture.
Yeah, we want to give you the key takeaways without overwhelming you with all the details.
Exactly. So let's start with the McKinsey report. This one is called AI in the Workplace, a report for 2025. And I mean, right out of the gate, it kind of grabs you with the sheer scale of what they're talking about.
Yeah, they really set the stage.
They do. Like, they compare the potential impact of AI to the steam engine.
Which, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement.
It is a bold statement.
Right.
And they're talking about, like, trillions of dollars, in potential productivity growth, like $4.4 trillion in added productivity for companies that can actually figure out how to use AI effectively.
That's not chump change.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge number. And I think the comparison to the steam engine is really apt.
Right.
It's not just about automating a few tasks. It's about fundamentally changing the way we work, the way we organize our economies.
Yeah. It's like a complete paradigm shift.
Exactly.
But here's the thing, like, the report also points out that even though most companies, like something like 92% of them, are planning to invest more in AI over the next 3 years, only a tiny fraction, like only 1%, actually consider themselves to have like a mature AI deployment.
Right.
So, they're putting money into it, but they're not quite sure how to make it work.
Right. They're not seeing that return on investment yet.
They're not. And it's interesting because the report was actually inspired by Reid Hoffman's new book, Super Agency. What could possibly go right with our AI future?
Well, I've heard about that.
Yeah, and Hoffman's very much focused on this idea of how AI can actually enhance human capabilities, like make us better at what we do.
This idea of super agency.
Exactly. So it's not about replacing humans, it's about like augmenting them.
Right, working together.
Yeah.
Human and AI, kind of a partnership.
Right, but to your point, like a lot of companies haven't figured out how to do that yet.
Right, and the McKinsey report actually identifies what they believe is the biggest barrier to scaling AI, the biggest roadblock.
What's that?
And it's not the employees.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people assume it's employee resistance, people afraid of losing their jobs or just not willing to adapt.
Right.
But that's not what they found.
So what is it?
It's the leadership. Yeah, the leaders aren't moving fast enough. They're not taking decisive action. They're not fully committing.
So it's a lack of vision from the top.
In many cases, yeah.
And they even mention in the report that they're actually having a whole event on April 8th specifically addressing compute power. Because it seems like access to, enough computing resources is becoming a major factor in whether or not companies can really succeed with AI.
Makes sense. These AI models require a ton of processing power.
Yeah.
Both for training and for actually running them.
Yeah.
And that can be expensive. And it can be logistically challenging.
It can be. So, it's not just about the algorithms anymore. It's about having the infrastructure to support them.
Exactly.
Okay, so how did McKinsey get all this information? They actually surveyed a pretty big group of people back in October and November of 2024.
Okay.
Over 3,600 employees, almost 240 C-level execs, mostly in the U.S. So, they've got some pretty good data to back up their analysis.
Right. It's not just, anecdotal evidence or speculation.
It's not. It's a pretty solid study, and it really gets into, the technology and the business readiness for AI adoption.
Okay. So they're looking at both sides of the coin.
Exactly.
The technical capabilities and the organizational readiness to actually use those capabilities.
Yeah. And getting back to Hoffman's book for a second, Super Agency, he really emphasizes how, AI technology has advanced so rapidly just in the past 2 years.
Yeah, the pace of innovation is incredible.
It is. Like, remember when Google came out with Gemini 1.5 and it could process 1 million tokens? And then, like, a few months later, the Pro version could handle 2 million.
Right.
I mean, that's a massive increase in a very short amount of time.
It is. And that that increase in context window, it makes a big difference.
It does.
Because it allows these models to process more information, understand more context, which leads to more coherent and nuanced responses.
So they can really understand the bigger picture better.
Exactly.
And the report actually outlines 5 big innovations that are driving this impact of AI on business.
Okay, 5 key areas to watch.
Yeah, and they've even got this exhibit 1, that kind of shows how the capabilities of LLMs have evolved from 2022 to January 2025.
Oh, that sounds useful.
It is. It's interesting to see, how models like Claude and Gemini and Llama and GPT have all, been developing. Yeah. And you can really see the shift towards, multimodal capabilities and more advanced reasoning.
So not just text anymore.
Right, not just text.
And not just, basic pattern recognition, but actually understanding and reasoning.
Yeah. Okay, so the first of those 5 big innovations is enhanced intelligence and reasoning.
Okay.
And this is really where, we're seeing some pretty impressive results. Like, the report highlights how GPT-4 can now score in the top 10% on the uniform bar exam. Yeah, and get 90% of the questions right on the U.S. medical licensing exam.
So passing with flying colors.
I mean, that's a huge leap from where things were with, GPT 3.5.
It is. It really shows how far these models have come in terms of their ability to comprehend and apply complex information.
Yeah, it's not just about retrieving information anymore.
Right.
It's about understanding it and reasoning through it.
That's crucial for a lot of business applications.
It is. I mean, the report even talks about, models like OpenAI's o1 and Google's Gemini 2.0 flash thinking mode, where these models can actually reason through information step by step, to arrive at their answers.
So it's more like a thought process.
Right, more like a human thought process.
Right.
The second big innovation is what they call agentic AI.
Agentic AI, okay. What is that?
So this is about AI models that can actually take actions, complete tasks without needing constant human input.
Okay. So not just providing information, but actually doing things.
Right. Like, they give this example, they contrast a 2023 chatbot. Which might suggest responses in a customer service situation,
right,
to a 2025 AI agent that can actually have a whole conversation with a customer, and then plan and execute the necessary actions, process payments, check for fraud, all that stuff.
So end-to-end task completion.
Right. And they specifically point to Salesforce's Agentforce as an example.
Oh, right.
Where they're embedding agentic AI right into their platform.
Interesting. So they're building a digital workforce.
Right. Where human employees and AI agents are working together.
Yeah, that's a pretty powerful concept.
It is. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the third big innovation is multimodality.
Multimodality.
Yeah.
So that's about AI models being able to handle different types of data.
Exactly. So not just text, but also audio, video, images. And they talk about how Google's Gemini Live has much better audio quality now, and OpenAI Sora, which can generate video from text prompts. I mean, that's pretty amazing stuff.
It is.
Yeah.
It really opens up a lot of possibilities.
It does. I mean, imagine AI systems that can understand customer sentiment from their voice, their facial expressions,
right,
or, being able to create training materials that are really engaging, using both text and video.
It's a much richer experience.
It is.
And it's more intuitive. I mean, we as humans, we communicate using multiple modalities.
Right.
So it makes sense for AI to do the same.
It does. Okay, so the fourth innovation is hardware.
Okay.
And this is really about the processing power, that's needed to run these sophisticated AI models.
Right. We were talking about that earlier.
We were. So things like, specialized chips, GPUs, TPUs, and the power of cloud computing. And this is what's enabling, real-time applications. Like, they give an example of an e-commerce chatbot that can use, edge hardware to analyze photos of damaged goods.
Okay.
So, you could submit a photo of, a product that arrived broken, and the AI could assess the damage and process your insurance claim right there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the hardware is catching up to the software?
It is, and it has to, because, these AI models are so demanding in terms of the computational resources they need.
Right.
Okay, the fifth innovation is increasing transparency.
Okay.
And they acknowledge in the report that there's, still work to be done in this area.
Transparency has been a big concern with AI.
It has been.
The whole black box problem.
Right. But they point to, improvements reported by Stanford CRFM in their transparency index for models from companies like Anthropic and Amazon. So, there is some progress being made. And they also highlight how explainable AI is being used in other applications, like, credit risk assessment. So, you can understand why an AI is making the decisions it's making.
Right. And that's important for building trust.
It is. Because if you don't know how an AI is arriving at its conclusions, it's hard to trust those conclusions.
Exactly. And it's also important for identifying potential bias.
It is.
If the AI is making unfair decisions, we need to be able to see that.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about the technology, the 5 big innovations.
Right.
Now let's shift gears a little bit and talk about employee readiness.
Okay. So how are people feeling about AI in the workplace?
Well, that's where this leadership gap really starts to become apparent.
Okay.
Because, their survey found that a whopping 94% of employees say they're familiar with generative AI.
Wow. That's almost everyone.
It is almost everyone.
So awareness is high.
Awareness is very high. But, leaders tend to underestimate how much their employees are actually using these tools. They estimated that only 4% of their workforce is using Gen AI for more than 30% of their daily tasks.
Okay.
But the employees themselves reported that it's actually 13%.
Oh, wow. So 3 times higher.
3 times higher.
So there's a disconnect there.
There is a big disconnect, and almost half of the employees, 47%, believe that they'll be using Gen AI for more than 30% of their work within the next year.
Okay. So they see it becoming a bigger part of their jobs.
They do, and that's double the expectation of their leaders.
Right. So the employees are ahead of the curve.
They are, and the report actually uses these archetypes from Hoffman's book.
Oh, right. The Zoomers, Bloomers, all
Yeah,
that.
Zoomers, Bloomers, Loomers, Noomers, to categorize employee attitudes towards AI.
Okay.
And it's interesting because even the gloomers and the doomers, who are, more skeptical or even negative about AI, they still say they have some familiarity and comfort with Gen AI.
So even the skeptics are engaging with it.
They are. It's unavoidable at this point.
It seems that way.
It does. And what employees really want, to make the most of AI is training and support.
Makes sense.
Yeah, almost half of them said they want formal training programs. They want access to beta tools, to experiment with. And some even said they'd like incentives to encourage adoption.
Okay. So they want to be empowered to use AI effectively.
They do. But over a fifth of employees reported that they're getting very little or no support in this area.
Oh, so there's a gap there as well.
There is. And it's interesting. International employees actually reported getting a bit more support than their U.S. counterparts.
Interesting.
But even they said they want more.
Right. So there's room for improvement across the board.
There is. Now, one group that really stands out as kind of champions of AI in the workplace is millennials.
Okay.
Specifically, the ones in that 35 to 44 age range. They seem to have the most experience with Gen AI.
Okay.
The most enthusiasm for it. And managers in that age group are constantly fielding questions about AI from their teams. And they're recommending AI tools.
So they're really driving adoption from the ground up.
They are. So McKinsey's takeaway here is that, leaders have this huge permission space when it comes to AI.
What do they mean by permission space?
The employees are ready. They're already using it. They want more support. So, leaders can really be bold. They can be ambitious.
Right. They don't have to hold back.
They don't. But of course, there's also this issue of speed versus safety.
Right.
The technology is moving incredibly fast. I mean, just look at how quickly ChatGPT's user base has grown.
Yeah, that's been phenomenal.
It has been. But leaders are, understandably a little more cautious.
So they have to consider the risk.
They do. And almost half the executives they surveyed said that their organizations are developing and releasing AI tools too slowly. Okay.
And the main reason they cited was a lack of talent. They don't have the people with the right skills to move as quickly as they'd like to.
Oh, the talent gap is a real issue.
It is. And of course, there's always the pressure to show ROI.
Right.
Companies are investing a lot in AI and they want to see results.
Of course.
And it seems like a lot of companies are still in the early stages of figuring out their AI strategies.
Yeah, I mean, this is all still relatively new.
It is. Like, only a quarter of the executives they surveyed have a defined roadmap for generative AI implementation.
Okay.
And just over half have, like, a draft roadmap in progress.
So a lot of companies are still figuring things out.
They are. And that's probably part of the reason why, AI hasn't really delivered that big enterprise-wide ROI yet.
Right.
But, the executives are optimistic. They think the revenue growth will come.
They're betting on the future. They are, but I think a key point here is that, a lot of companies are still focused on, like, smaller scale AI projects, very specific use cases.
Right.
And McKinsey's arguing that, companies need to be bolder.
They need to think bigger.
They need to think bigger. Think about those transformative applications.
Like what?
Like they give examples like, using robotics in manufacturing, predictive AI in energy, AI-driven drug discovery.
Okay. So really game-changing stuff.
Yeah. Things that could fundamentally reshape entire industries.
Right. Not just incremental improvements.
Exactly.
But real disruption.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about the opportunities, the challenges.
Right.
Now, what about the barriers to actually scaling AI?
Okay. What's stopping companies from realizing the full potential of AI?
Well, McKinsey's point is that it's not the technology anymore.
Okay. So technology's there.
It's there. The problem is the organizational transformation.
Right. Because adopting AI at scale, that's a huge undertaking.
It is. I mean, they point out that something like 70% of major corporate transformation efforts fail.
Wow.
Yeah, and leaders often underestimate their own role in that.
So it's about leadership again.
It is, and they outline these specific operational headwinds that companies are facing, like lack of alignment among leaders, uncertainty about costs,
Right.
difficulty with workforce planning, supply chain dependencies, and this growing demand for explainability.
Okay. So a lot of moving parts.
A lot of moving parts.
And a lot of potential for things to go wrong.
Right. So to help companies navigate all this, they've come up with this framework they call Rewired.
Rewired. Okay. What's that about?
So it's got 6 key elements: a clear roadmap, the right talent, an adaptable operating model, the necessary technology, robust data management, and a scalable approach to implementation.
Okay. So it's a holistic approach.
It is. It's about, building a culture of adaptability, using modern technology practices, having agile teams.
Sounds like a good recipe for success.
It does. And they also highlight some specific adaptations that companies need to make.
Like what?
So things like building adaptability into their tech stack, having federated governance models, ensuring budget agility, using AI benchmarks, addressing skill gaps, and maintaining a human-centric approach throughout the process.
So it's not just about the technology. It's about the people and the processes.
Right. It's about the whole organization.
Exactly.
Okay, so that's the McKinsey report.
Okay.
Now let's talk about some other AI news.
Sounds good.
So Google just dropped Gemini 2.5.
Yes.
And they're calling it a thinking model.
The thinking model. Interesting.
Yeah, and they claim it can do this more deliberate reasoning before it generates a response.
Okay, so it's not just, pattern matching or statistical analysis.
Right, it's actually thinking things through.
Okay.
And Google says this makes it much more accurate, especially in complex areas like coding, science, and math. And the reporting that it's, topped a bunch of leaderboards on reasoning, knowledge, science, math.
Okay.
But it did come in second on the web dev coding leaderboard.
Oh, who beat it?
Anthropic's Claude 3.7 Sonnet.
Okay.
So, there's still competition out there.
Right, it's not a one-horse race.
It's not. But speaking of competition, ChatGPT is still the dominant player.
Yeah, they've got a huge lead.
They do. As of February, they had 43% market share.
Wow.
And something like 5.2 billion visits to their platform per month.
That's incredible.
It is. DeepSeek is in third place now.
Okay.
With 6.58% market share. And they're growing pretty fast.
So they're one to watch.
They are. And we've got some more detailed user stats for ChatGPT.
Oh.
So as of March, they have about 400 million weekly active users.
Wow.
And they're aiming for 1 billion by the end of the year.
Ambitious.
Very ambitious. And that 5.2 billion monthly visits to chatgpt.com, that's real. That's not just made up.
Okay, so people are actually using it.
They are. Demographically, it skews a bit male, 64% male.
Okay.
Over 45% of users are under 24.
So a lot of young people.
A lot of young people. Interestingly, about 64% report having a low income.
Yeah.
And about 15% of users are in the U.S.
Okay.
So it's a pretty global phenomenon.
It is.
And its initial growth was like explosive.
Right. It went viral.
It did, like
Yeah.
1 million users in 5 days.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about XAI for a second.
Okay. Elon Musk's venture.
Right. So they've signed an MOU with the U.S. AI Safety Institute, AISI, for, research collaboration, testing, evaluation, all that stuff.
Okay. So they're working on AI safety.
They are. But this agreement was made under the Biden administration.
Right.
And there are some concerns about what might happen to ASI under a new administration. And then there's this whole thing with Musk's DOGE initiative.
DOGE?
Yeah, it stands for Department of Government Efficiency.
Okay.
And it's about like streamlining government operations using AI. But, the details are kind of murky.
Right. It's a little hush-hush.
It is. Okay, last topic.
Hit me.
Copyright.
Oh, yeah. The big debate.
The big debate. So, OpenAI and Google are lobbying pretty hard to have AI training on copyrighted data classified as fair use.
Right.
And their argument is that it's, essential for national security, for competing with China, all that. But this raises a lot of questions. Legal, ethical, economic.
It does. It's a very complex issue.
It is. I mean, we've already seen Meta getting into legal trouble for allegedly using copyrighted books to train their models. And there are lawsuits from French publishers. And the critics are arguing that, these AI models aren't really creating anything new.
Right. They're just remixing existing material.
So, is that really fair use?
That's a good question.
It is. And the courts are going to have to decide.
Right.
There are actually several lawsuits against OpenAI right now.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is a big deal.
It is. It could have huge implications for the future of AI.
It could. And one last little tidbit.
Okay.
This is kind of weird.
What's that?
DeepSeek's new model, DeepSeek V3, it's been observed sometimes identifying itself as ChatGPT.
Really?
Yeah. Like it'll claim to be a version of GPT-4.
Huh. How is that possible?
Well, they think it's because it was trained on, outputs from ChatGPT and GPT-4.
Oh, so it's mimicking.
Right. It's mimicking. And this has raised some concerns about, trustworthiness.
Right.
And potential bias amplification.
Yeah, if it's just repeating what it's learned from other models, it's not very creative.
It's not. And it could perpetuate existing biases.
Right.
Okay, so that's a lot of information.
It is.
But hopefully it gives you a good sense of, what's happening in the world of AI right now.
Yeah, I think we've covered the key trends and the key challenges.
We have. So let's wrap up with some final thoughts.
Okay.
So AI is advancing incredibly quickly. There are huge opportunities, but there are also significant challenges.
Right.
And employees seem to be more ready than their leaders realize.
Yeah, that's a key takeaway.
It is. So, leaders need to step up.
They need to be bold. They need to be strategic.
They do. And we need to be having these conversations about, ethics, about safety, about the impact of AI on society.
Absolutely. We can't just focus on the technology. We have to think about the consequences.
Right. So here's a final thought for you, our listener.
Okay.
Given everything we've discussed, what aspect of AI development, as of right now, March 2025, do you think will have the most far-reaching and unexpected consequences in the years to come?
That's a great question.
It is. It's something to really think about. Because this is just the beginning.
It is. The AI revolution is just getting started.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.